The air in Chicago O'Hare's first-class lounge hummed with the frantic energy of a Monday morning, but Marcus Thorne felt perfectly calm. He glanced at the simple, well-worn Timex on his wrist, a graduation gift from his late father. His father had always told him, "Your work may take you high, son, but always keep your feet on the ground." At 43, as the CEO of Nexus AI Solutions, Marcus held on to that advice like scripture. He preferred flying commercial. He believed the moment a leader isolated himself from the everyday experiences of the people he served was the moment he began to fail them. He stood as the gate agent announced boarding for Apex Air Flight 720 to San Francisco. The flight was already showing a 20-minute delay. The gate area at B-12 buzzed with irritated business travelers checking watches and tapping at phones. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. "Now boarding our Platinum Elite members and first-class passengers," the agent's voice cut through the muffled announcements. Marcus, dressed in a tailored navy suit that bore no flashy labels, waited his turn. He didn't push to the front. He offered the agent a quiet morning, scanned his boarding pass, and walked onto the jet bridge. He entered the quiet, carpeted first-class cabin. At the doorway stood the senior flight attendant, Sarah Jenkins. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she offered him a forced, tight-lipped smile as he passed. He nodded politely and made his way to his seat, 3A. He stowed his leather portfolio in the overhead bin. The portfolio, like his watch, was not new, but it was impeccably maintained. He settled into the wide seat, the quiet hum of the engines a familiar comfort. His goal was simple: get to San Francisco and deliver his keynote speech. He opened his tablet, the title page of his presentation glowing softly, "Accountability in the Age of Automation." He was so absorbed in his notes that he barely noticed the final passengers boarding, until, that is, they stopped abruptly right at his row. He looked up. A couple in their mid-50s stood there, dressed in loud, expensive brands, emanating impatience. William and Elizabeth Abbott were irritated by the delay, and even more irritated to see someone in their favorite seats. William frowned, his gaze sweeping over Marcus's simple watch and unbranded suit. "Excuse me," he said, his voice sharp and carrying in the quiet cabin. "I believe you're in our seat." Marcus looks up slowly from his tablet, his eyes calm and steady. "No, sir. This is my assigned seat. 3A. We're just getting started, and the tension in that first-class cabin is already thick. If you're still watching and you can feel that confrontation building, let me know you're locked in by commenting with the number 8 below. And if this is the kind of powerful story you've been searching for, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Black King and turn on the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss how Marcus handles what's coming. Your support allows us to continue finding and sharing these critical stories that inform and inspire. Now, let's get back to the flight. "There must be some mistake," William Abbott insisted, his voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "We always sit in 3A and 3B. Marcus kept his composure, simply holding up his boarding pass as clear, simple evidence of his assignment. "I understand, sir," Marcus replied, his voice calm and even. "But this is my assigned seat for today's flight." Elizabeth Abbott, seeing she wasn't winning the argument, huffed in frustration. She scanned the cabin and locked eyes with Sarah Jenkins. With a subtle lift of her chin, she signaled the senior flight attendant. Sarah, who had been watching the exchange eagerly from the galley, strode over, her professional smile replaced by a thin line of authority. The cabin, which had been buzzing with the quiet small talk of boarding, grew silent. Passengers, sensing drama, stopped their conversations to watch. Across the aisle in 3C, a man in his late 60s named Michael put down his Wall Street Journal, watching the unfolding scene with a familiar, weary look. Sarah Jenkins ignored Marcus's boarding pass and spoke directly to Elizabeth Abbott, as if consoling a friend. "I'll handle this." She then turned her full attention to Marcus. "Sir, I need to ask you to move. There seems to have been a mistake with the seating. These seats are reserved for our most important customers." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I believe I am one of them. I'm an executive Sapphire member." This gave Sarah pause. Her eyebrows raised in clear, unfiltered disbelief. "May I see your card?" she asked, her tone sharp with skepticism. Marcus calmly produced it. Sarah took the black card, scrutinized it, and then her eyes flicked down to his wrist, to the simple, unadorned Timex watch. Her expression hardened. The judgment was obvious. This man, with his plain watch and quiet suit, couldn't possibly be a high-tier member. She handed the card back dismissively. Nevertheless, she continued, we must accommodate the Abbotts. We can move you to our premium economy section with an appropriate credit. Marcus shook his head, his politeness unwavering but firm. I appreciate the offer, but I'll be staying in my assigned seat. Sarah's patience snapped. The veneer of customer service vanished. She leaned in, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Sir, I'm trying to be polite. This section is for our actual VIP passengers. You've clearly been accommodated in this cabin by mistake. You don't belong here. The insult, you don't belong here, hung in the dead-quiet cabin, a stark, ugly thing. William Abbott, looking satisfied, pulled out his phone. This is ridiculous. I'm calling Thomas Baker. The name Thomas Baker wasn't customer service. It was corporate security. Sarah Jenkins smirked, a look of cold triumph on her face, believing she had finally won the confrontation. The cabin door was about to close. The air was thick and heavy, charged with unspoken hostility. Passengers were openly staring now, and in seat 2C, a journalist named Sophia had discreetly started recording on her phone. From the galley, Leo, a junior flight attendant in his 20s, watched with a sick feeling in his stomach, clearly troubled by Sarah's blatant abuse of power. Emboldened by the call to security, Sarah leaned in one last time. Sir, she hissed, I need to advise you that being uncooperative will make this flight very difficult for you. Marcus simply met her gaze. He had heard similar words before in different contexts, but the intent was always the same. It was the kind of warning that carried a different weight depending on who was receiving it. Moments later, Thomas Baker strode onto the aircraft. He was a man in his 40s, ex-military, carrying himself with a rigid, intimidating authority. He didn't even look at Marcus. He addressed Sarah directly, as if Marcus was an object to be dealt with. What's the problem here? Sarah pointed. This gentleman in 3A is refusing to cooperate and accommodate our Platinum Elite members, Mr. and Mrs. Abbott. Before Baker could respond, Michael, the retired executive in 3C, scoffed loudly. Excuse me, young man, he said, his voice cutting through the tension, directed at Baker. I was with Continental for 30 years. What you're doing and what she's doing violates federal DOT regulations. We used to call this service, he said, gesturing around the cabin. Now you seem to call it privilege. It's a disgrace. Baker shot Michael a dismissive look, clearly annoyed by the interruption. He leaned over Marcus, invading his space. Sir, Baker said, his voice low and threatening, we can resolve this amicably, or we can make this an incident. We don't want to delay the flight. The threat of being forcibly removed, perhaps even arrested, was no longer veiled. It was a promise. Marcus looked at the hostile faces surrounding him, Sarah's victorious smirk, Baker's intimidation, the Abbott's smug entitlement. He nodded slowly. I see. He took a calm breath. I think it's time I made a call. Before Baker could stop him, Marcus dialed his phone. His voice was perfectly level, steady and clear, cutting through the absolute silence of the cabin. Lisa, yes, it's me. I'm on Apex Air Flight 720, Chicago. I need you to initiate Protocol 6. Yes. Full documentation. Thank you. He hangs up. Sarah and Baker exchange a confused look. Protocol what? Sarah scoffs. Marcus simply looks down at his father's Timex watch. The clock has started. What a turning point. Marcus has been threatened by security and has just unleashed Protocol 6. The 28-minute clock is ticking. If you are still watching and you are on the edge of your seat waiting to see what happens next, let me know you're here by commenting with the number 8 below. And if you haven't already, I strongly urge you to subscribe to Black King and turn on that notification bell. You have just witnessed the moment the tables turned, and you will not want to miss the fallout. Your support helps us continue to create amazing content that informs and inspires you. Now let's watch what Protocol 6 really does. The cabin was silent. Sarah Jenkins and Thomas Baker stared at Marcus, baffled by the cryptic phrase, Protocol 6. Protocol what? Sarah scoffed. Marcus didn't answer. He had made his one phone call. Now he simply sat back and looked at his father's Timex watch. The tension in the air was unbearable. It was static and heavy, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. It had been nearly 25 minutes since the confrontation began. Just as Baker was about to speak again, his corporate-issued phone buzzed violently in his pocket. It wasn't a call. It was a high-priority, system-wide alert. He read the message on the screen, and every drop of color drained from his face. His authoritative demeanor shattered, replaced by pure, cold panic. He showed the screen to Sarah, whose hands immediately began to shake. That's not possible, she stammered. Before she could finish, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Davidson emerged. His face was grim, his expression serious. He ignored Sarah. He ignored Thomas Baker. He ignored the stunned Abbotts. He walked directly to seat 3A, his eyes locked on Marcus. His voice was deep and filled with a sudden, profound respect. "Mr. Thorne," he asked, the emphasis on the name silencing the cabin. "I'm Captain Davidson. On behalf of Apex Air, I want to personally apologize for this disturbance. You are, of course, entitled to your assigned seat." A collective gasp went through the first-class cabin. The Abbotts looked as if they'd seen a ghost. In seat 2C, the journalist Sophia whispered to Michael, "That's Marcus Thorne of Nexus AI. They're heavily invested in Apex's parent company, Global Air Partners." Michael, the retired exec, simply nodded, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "Precisely." The captain's radio crackled on his shoulder, an urgent, fleet-wide message coming through. He listened, his face turning from grim to pale white. "My God," he muttered under his breath. He keyed his mic for the cabin PA. His voice was strained, barely controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. We've just received word all Apex Air flights, nationwide, have been placed on a temporary ground hold." It was 8:33 a.m. Exactly 28 minutes after Sarah Jenkins had told Marcus Thorne he didn't belong. A wave of confused, angry murmurs erupted from the main cabin, but in first class, there was only stunned silence. "Grounded? All flights." William Abbott, his face ashen, frantically typed on his phone. The grounded announcement wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a corporate catastrophe. Sarah Jenkins and Thomas Baker stood frozen, pale and defeated. The power they had wielded so arrogantly just minutes before had evaporated, leaving only the sickening realization of their error. The atmosphere in the grounded aircraft was thick with shock and a dawning, terrible understanding. From the galley, Leo, the junior flight attendant, stepped forward. He was visibly shaking but determined. "Captain?" "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the silence. I need to say something. This happens regularly. It's not just the Abbotts. Sarah, she rewards staff who handle passengers like this, and she punishes those who don't." This confession, this validation of a systemic rot, hung in the air, confirming everything Marcus already knew. Sarah, defeated, didn't even have the energy to deny it. William Abbott, meanwhile, was whispering harshly to his wife, his panic making him careless. "He's sinking the stock. Frank, I told him. He controls or influences 30% of the parent company's shares." Marcus, who was still the calm center of gravity in the cabin, overheard him. He turned his head slightly and replied, his voice carrying clearly, "It's not about the stock, Mr. Abbott. It's about accountability." As those words settled, the captain's radio crackled again. He listened intently, his eyes widening. He looked directly at Sarah Jenkins, his expression one of cold, final disappointment. He keyed the PA mic, but this time, he addressed his crew. "I've just been informed," he said, his voice grave, "that Frank Williams has been asked to step down as CEO of Apex Air, effective immediately. An interim CEO, Ms. Laura Martinez, has been appointed. She is requesting permission to address this flight and Mr. Thorne specifically via the aircraft's communication system." Right now, the PA system clicked to life, not with the captain's voice, but with a clear, direct, female voice broadcasted from headquarters. "Ladies and gentlemen of Flight 720, This is Laura Martinez, interim CEO of Apex Air. Marcus Thorne listened intently, his expression firm. The cabin was silent. I want to personally apologize to all of you for this disruption, Laura's voice continued, but especially to one passenger. Mr. Marcus Thorne, the treatment you received today was unacceptable, unprofessional, and reflects a deep failure in our corporate culture. She made no excuses. She announced that Protocol 6, which she called the Thorne Accountability Framework, would be implemented fleet-wide, starting immediately with emergency training for all staff. We thank Mr. Thorne, she concluded, for holding us accountable. As the address ended, ground security quietly boarded. Sarah Jenkins and Thomas Baker were escorted off the plane. The Abbotts, no longer speaking, gathered their expensive bags and deplaned in shame, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. 5 years later, Marcus Thorne was on the same 8:05 a.m. flight from Chicago to San Francisco, once again in Seat 3A. But the airline felt different. The Apex Air staff was diverse, professional, and genuinely warm. As he settled in, a young black woman in her mid-20s took Seat 3C across the aisle. She was arranging her laptop, which was covered in engineering stickers. She glanced up, did a double-take, and smiled hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "You're Marcus Thorne, aren't you? From Nexus AI." Marcus acknowledged he was. "I'm Tanya," she said, her voice full of respect. "I'm an engineer. I wanted to say thank you. What you did 5 years ago, it changed things. For people like me, it mattered." Marcus smiled, genuinely touched. He thought of his father. He glanced down at the same simple Timex watch on his wrist. His father's words echoed in his mind, clear as the day they were spoken. "You changed the rules of the game, son, not just how you played it." That's the real legacy. As the plane lands smoothly in San Francisco, Marcus reflects that the revolution hadn't been loud or violent. It had been polite, measured, and permanent. And it all began with a simple, firm refusal to accept the unacceptable. The gratitude in that young engineer's eyes, 5 years later, showed the true legacy of Marcus Thorne's stand. It's a powerful reminder that when we judge others by their appearance, like a simple watch or the color of their skin, we may be silencing the very person capable of changing the world. True dignity doesn't shout. It simply holds its ground. What part of Marcus's journey resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and to hear more powerful stories that touch the heart, be sure to join us by subscribing to the Black King channel.